And we're live. I wasn't doing a millennial pause, I was just getting ready. Welcome to Talkaoke. It's September Democracy Edition. So we can start celebrations for democracy, as we can see. And I think the first thing that we need to do is just say that we're Talkaoke. We're a big table of chat. We are a talk show where you guys are the VIPs. That includes people online. Do we have people online?
Not
We're
yet,
filming.
but later.
That's okay. So just IRL today, IRL today. And to kick things off, we need to find out about our panellists, our guests of the evening. So I'm going to start off with a very easy question. What is your name?
Mikey.
Bella.
Over here.
Margot.
And
Sheila.
Sheila, Mikey, Bella, Margot. All right, so what are people thinking about? What is the topic of conversation we're talking about today? Do people have opinions on democracy?
Well, I think we missed the actual democracy day, but I'm thinking about democracy every day, and I was just reading a book called How Minds Change, which is all. And I'm just going to adjust that a little bit because we're getting a bit of.
Bit of feedback. Oh, a bit.
No, breathing. Yeah.
Not very
And it was kind of like all about the psychology of how and why people change their minds. In order, and this was the subtext, it's not what they said, but in order to get them to vote for the right people.
Okay.
But I sort of felt that actually it's like trying to shape the body to fit the dress rather than shaping the dress to fit the body. Because there's an exploration of people's psychology, and it's like this is how you hack people's psychology in order to get them to think the right things, rather than this is how people think. So why is our democracy not designed in a way that people actually are, and they think what they think and actually suits them?
Do you think at the moment democracy as we experience is being manipulated rather than potentially being catered for, whatever that means? We've got Mikey to respond. Anyone want to respond to Mikey before I jump back in? And we've got some new people on the table, so I'm going to, before we do anything, Mikey, hold that thought, can we have some introductions on the table? I'm going to start from behind me.
Bella. I'm Margot, hi.
Hello, welcome to Talkaoke.
Hi, I'm Matt.
Matt.
Mikey?
Dave.
Dave.
Sheila.
Fantastic. So Mikey was saying he's a bit disillusioned with democracy. He thinks that that the idea is to kind of manipulate voters rather than actually think about what voters want and cater to that. And you had a response.
Well, it's not exactly what I was saying. What I'm saying is the system is, well, I'll put it in a different way. The democratic system is kind of designed for public school, rich people to kind of argue across benches, when actually, if we want to involve the whole of society, we have to actually design democracy to fit how psychology and society actually works. And we know a lot more about that because of the study of psychology and sociology. Blah, 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 blah.
There was a hip from the side of the table.
Oh no, it was a hear.
Oh, here.
That's parliamentary language. I would argue that democracy does not really exist in this country, because you can't have democracy unless everybody's got a fair say and a fair hearing. And if the politicians are bought and paid for, at least the ones in power, what chance the man and the woman in the street getting their voice heard or their interests cared for? I mean, if you haven't got a 20 grand in your back pocket to fund a politician's son, you're not going to get anything done for you, it would seem, despite all the change rhetoric we hear recently.
Okay, so there's maybe these elements about change, but actually, is it serving the people? Is there an elitist argument going on? Are people actually being represented or being served?
So there was this educationalist who did a lot of stuff with like Workers' Ed, RH20. He said like democracy is an unstable compound. Sort of stuck in my brain, so it just landed there. But basically, I think like with democracy, it's like how far do you want to go? Yeah. How intensely do you want to listen and engage? And I think what we have at the moment is like performative democracy at best, really. It's a bit of a sideshow. I think the economics drive the politics increasingly. I think with all the financialisation, all the offshore, I don't think our democracy has agency anyway to get much done. But yeah, I'm just like gobsmacked at the cross on the box every 5 years, you know, and that you call that democracy. I think what I'm passionate about as a community organiser and a community worker is the everyday conversations that people have. You know, through that dialogue you take action, and that feels a lot more accessible and a lot more real. Anyway.
Okay, there's a few things there. So maybe, how much democracy do we want? There's levels of it. We feel like we've got maybe a bit of a superficial level at the moment. But also maybe democracies happen, that's something that happens on the street level as well. I'm going to just get a quick name here.
Sarah.
Sarah, thank you. And a point over. Welcome, Sarah, to the table of chats. There are Chris, there are drinks around. Mikey, you had a point.
I mean, I think for me there's two different sides to it. One is this question about, well, there's two sides to that as well. Speaking and the freedom of speech, but as you said, Matt, being heard, because I think that's just as important as saying what you've got to say. And then there's the element which is about power and agency, and actually that being heard, being turned into something where you're actually, you know, driving the car rather than being driven by being a passenger.
I've got to go Margot and then Dave.
Thank you. No, but I was just thinking about democracy. Like a while back, Mike, you said about the something, the dress not being fit, the clothes not being fitted to the body. Yeah. For the body that doesn't. Anyways. Yeah. But it just kind of made me think about like the social media world. This is not like a direct link to democracy, maybe, but I mean, is democracy applied in like social media? Like, you know, because for instance, social media is pretty toxic. Could we take a vote on this? Like, do we want to have it or stuff like that? Or, you know, what do we mean by democracy anyways?
Okay, Margot's question's lying in the air. I'm going to go back to this response. We're going to try and not get caught up in all the wires. Good luck.
Well, the Greeks had the first democracy in inverted commas, but all the people who did the work, i.e. the slaves, didn't get a vote or a say. So it was interesting, but a failed experiment. The most absolute democracy, as far as I can tell, were the Russian Soviets for a while. They were factory committees who decided what went on in the factories. There were housing committees that decided what went on in the housing estates. There was committees in the army to decide what the army should be fighting for. But of course, reality kicked in, and wars and famine and who knows what, and political control, and people got tired, and they disappeared. So, but without economic democracy, i.e. controlling the means of production, we're all wage slaves at the end of the day. And the people who own the factories decide what you're going to get paid, how long you're going to work, how long you're going to live, essentially. So the ideas are out there. We've just got to put them in some sort of form that the majority of people want to do. Socials. See, I was outside Waitrose yesterday, and they were giving away. This is classic capitalism. They were giving out free. Ollie and Steen, I think, giving out wonderful pastries. Oh yeah, I'll have some of that. Oh, can you sign up so we can give you a year of socials? I don't know, I don't want a year of socials, I want more cake. But there you go, bless them, it's nice cake.
You did sign up for the socials.
Yeah, I think that point about how these decisions are made and actually throwing that out there that, are we all just slaves to the system? I mean, there's a few key decisions about, state pension age, that's just gone up a couple of years. Did the people give an opinion, or were they consulted on that at all? Tuition fees going up to $9,000, now maybe $15,000. The electoral system or voting system changing, like people have no say on these very like fundamental and constitutional issues that affect everyone's lives. And yeah, one of the quotes that we have at Antiparty to point around, do we actually live in a democracy, is the greatest threat to democracy is the illusion that we live in one. So the first step is really just opening our eyes to the fact that something needs to change, and we can refer to the old ancient Greek times, but yeah, it's definitely time to reimagine democracy now in a creative way.
So do people agree? Do you feel like you are living in a democracy?
I feel I do agree with you, but it's just a matter of us saying it. We talk, but it's not done. Is it put in action? Who leads it? Who approves it? How many people approve it? When it's approved, is it really taken? I feel there's so much lies that even if it's a negative thing, it could be put in a positive, or it's a positive thing, it could be put in a negative. I feel we say there's democracy, but it's not working anymore, I think. I feel whoever is in charge, whatever they feel like is what they do. For me, I feel that I'm getting, I don't know whether because I'm growing older, but I'm losing interest. Things are just escalating. That's how I feel. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a sense of maybe of powerlessness. There's things are escalating. There's hums I'm hearing as well. So I'm going to go here.
Hums. Well, I think if we stick around long enough till the end of the year, we will see American democracy collapse, because wonderful Mr. Trump has decided that if he wins, you won't have to vote again, apparently, whatever that means. He said that. He's on record saying that. What he means is a different ballgame. Of course, if he loses, he will say it was stolen, and his supporters will decide to take it back. So I think when the tensions in democracy, which trying to hold a ring together, people, say, oh, well, we lost, fair enough, or we won, fair enough. If they, as soon as it's not fair enough, people take to guns, possibly, in the US anyway, where there are 2 guns for every person, which is some kind of democracy, isn't it? That's a hell of a lot of guns, 400 million guns in America. Wow. Anyway, I'll leave you on that wonderful, cheery thought.
Leave it on that bombshell. I'm going to go for it. We've got some new faces at table, so I'm going to go around the whole table so I don't forget.
Sarah.
Sophie.
Margot?
Matt.
Mikey.
Carlo.
Sheila.
Ella?
Okay, great. And we had a point from Matt jumping in. Oh, and hello, I'm Evie. I'm in the middle.
It's a big one, isn't it? Democracy. And I was like resonating with what you were saying about a sense of sort of failed hopes really around it all, and like who really believes in it? I think. I think there's like a kind of pessimism of the mind or the intellect and an optimism of the will, because I think every day people show up for each other, in terms of small things and large, and I think we frame democracy in the wrong ways. Like we invest in these imaginary structures, contract theory of the state, the market, all these kind of things. But what's real to people might be the conversation on the school gate. I'm a community worker in East London in Thamesview Estate, and it's got the highest rate of mortality in London. The police just gave up. They don't investigate anything. The developers are just building. People's income goes on bills and fictitious charges, and yet somehow people still retain, really thriving human relationships as well. So I think what I'm really interested in is like prefigurative politics, imagining it and doing it. And I think it's not going to be the state, it's not going to be councils, it's not going to be government, it's not going to be corporates and the market. I think change will come from like the margins of people with their associations. I think the opportunity for tech to support all of that could be pretty amazing. So sort of blockchain, quadratic voting, like I understand what those things are, I think could be really good as well.
Mike, you've got a point that you want to respond.
I just want to endorse what you're saying, but I do think that, in a way, for democracy, whatever democracy is, to progress, we need to like just let it evolve, allow it to evolve, and it won't probably be government that does that job because they're not that interested in giving people more power. But people are interested in getting more power. So if there's systems that actually work for people in smaller ways, where communities can be stronger, then I think that is the future for democracy, to actually build stronger communities at that grassroots level and then grow it from there.
Okay, so we've got a sense that maybe at like the ground level, grassroots level, we can get a sense of democracy, maybe a sense of change, maybe a way of being heard, but that's maybe not getting any higher. I don't know. Any thoughts that we've had on the table from here, Carlo?
The last general election was interesting, not for the result. The whole thing was staged. There were very few, if any, public meetings whatsoever. Politicians don't want to meet the people. They certainly don't want to be asked questions and challenged, which is our right. We have got a right to ask these people who are paid by the public, why do they do things, what are they going to do, when they're going to do them, why haven't they done things, hold them to account. The most positive thing was that the record number of independent candidates, people who thought, these parties ain't working for me, I'm going to represent my community, and 5 of them got elected against all the odds. So, because our system is designed for parties to get elected, not individuals, but it shows it could be done when there's enough local feeling that people come forward and these people have some connection with the public and get elected. So it's not completely miserable and hopeless, but the powers that be do not want us to have more power, as Mikey said.
Oh, we sort of mentioned before a bit, yeah, Sarah.
I could hear you. So what you're suggesting, we should not give up, we should be more optimistic. Because when you say it's like they want us to give up, when we give up, they get more say. So the more people are more stronger and not giving up, pushing for more democracy. Could it work? Or should we be winners?
Who is, I'm curious who are the powers that be? Who are the they that are maybe denying us democracy or at least getting in the way?
Yeah, so interestingly, obviously, these are people as well. Politicians, party members, etc. So when we talk about, this other, they, them, etc., this powers that be, as if they're this separate, and then to your point around, it's the parties that have the power, not the people. We've seen how those individuals within parties, when they have to vote against their moral and principled view, whether it's Gaza, the Rwanda bill, but their party's forcing them to vote the other way to what they think in their heart is actually the right thing to do, then they risk losing their whole job and their career. So is that right? So there's actually a concept here that was brought up even today in a separate group chat and about the use of AI in replacing these representatives potentially. So if there was an AI that was that third party other mediator that, that's not human, hopefully not as biased, would that solve the problems? Because it shut down the debate in that group chat. And so why not? Why not have an AI president or PM replace this affected and erroneous human?
AI president, AI prime minister, people's thoughts.
I mean, I think the problem would still be the same problem about who's programmed the AI and what the values of that AI are, and would it, if I was gonna, first of all, I'd need to learn a lot about computing, but then I would make sure that it, for that kind of old idea of, for the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people, would be the kind of, the goal of my AI. But it kind of depends what people have talked about the economy or making money or power. But so all of these things, the AI could be designed in lots of different ways. And would you trust the people that actually did that programming, especially with our combined knowledge of programming, is probably not that high.
Got a point over here.
Well, the problem with AI and tech is it's owned by billionaires who there is no control over whatsoever. Elon Musk just does what he likes on Twitter blocks people. If you've got 10,000 followers, you might wake up and you've got 9,000 followers the next day, and it's arbitrary. So until we control the tech autocrats, until we overthrow that and have our own systems and our own democracy, because it's all very subtle how these things. You think you're in some kind of democracy on Twitter, but you're not. The people you associate with are good people, but it's all being controlled behind the scenes like some kind of Wizard of Oz. And not a lot of people realise that. I mean, if you just like cats and ducks on little dogs on there, great, enjoy yourself. But for any serious political debate, it's fixed. Let me tell you.
Okay, so we have a little bit of maybe tech has been posed as possibly a solution by Matt there. And we've also got maybe some suggestions that actually it's a load of noise. We've also got a new face at the table. What's your name?
It's Agbel.
Agbel. Matt or Margot, one of you had a point that you wanted to make?
Okay. Bella's provocation. I think AI is already here. I think people like Trump are, and maybe even the sort of Blair focus groups were modelling and using tech to kind of play games anyway.
What was going on in the Blair focus group?
Well, it was sort of market testing what people's responses are, and then triangulation.
The nudge.
Yeah, behaviour change, all of that kind of thing. So I think it's not like this thing has come out of nowhere. I think to some extent, like, who's the spider in the web? Is it Peter Thiel? Is it some libertarian billionaire sort of nut job? Is relevant. But yeah, one of the things I wanted to flip was quite often in what I do, I sort of ask people, like, who's their favourite leader? And they never say themselves. Yeah, they always go for some sort of random billionaire or some celebrity or whatever. And I think if you don't start with the creativity and the agency and possibly the genius of what people bring, then maybe we're not sort of seeing it right as well.
Okay, there are quite a lot of things out there. Maybe one that we can think about is, who's your favourite leader? Is it you? Welcome, I should say, also to Talkaoke. I think Margot just doing a little bit of... she is also our favourite leader, but we won't say anything. But this is Talkaoke. It's a table of chat. Tonight we're talking about democracy. And because there's also another new face at the table, could you just say what your name is?
Hello, my name's Helen.
This is Helen. And so we've been talking about democracy. We've been talking about whether people feel heard. We've been talking about what the role of technology is in democracy. Does it allow people to be heard, to express grievances, or is it just a load of noise? And then we're also Matt just threw it out there, thinking about what leadership is. Can you be a leader?
Well, I think I think you might have hit on something there, because I think most people that want to be leaders, that's the biggest kind of lack of qualification for the job, because they're generally egotistical and possibly narcissistic, not thinking of anyone in particular, probably sociopathic. So it's the very, very worst kind of people. Well, I mean, you might argue that a sociopath is a good leader in time of war, because they can make difficult decisions. But the whole way that leadership works is it's the very worst. And I know a lot of people like Margot that would be good leaders, but would never put themselves forward because they're not either narcissistic or egotistical.
Okay, yeah, so do we think the leaders in your life are narcissists or sociopaths? Bella, you had a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, I think because in that point around selection of a leader, right, that self-selection process is what's going on right now, and that is what's delivering these narcissistic psychopaths, etc., because of the electoral system that we have to vote those people in power. But I don't necessarily think that forcing someone against their will, like an unsuspecting Margot who doesn't actually want to, should be is a great idea either, because then, you've got a begrudged sort of leader. So then that brings us back to, what if we had a benevolent AI leader that was just, programmed collectively and democratically and evenly and fairly and without any bias or selfish reasons, helped to govern us all.
Okay, so we've got maybe the potential of a benevolent AI leader, maybe a grumpy but begrudging leader, or a psychopathic leader. Which one are you?
Psychopathic leader, I guess. I don't mind whichever one you want.
No, go to your point.
But my point was that if our electoral systems bring about this kind of sociopathic leadership, there are lots of other systems. We have, royal families, we have other leadership situations in the world that don't involve any electoral system at all. And I think they all turn out to be sociopathic. It doesn't seem to make a difference, the people that end up at the top. Now, whether it's because, they say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I wonder whether even the most benevolent Margot would end up as a leader of some powerful country, and then we'd be made to call her the most benevolent leader, and it would get shot.
Sent to the gulag.
Exactly, and she'd become corrupted potentially.
Okay, I like it. So it's people saying maybe like whatever the system, power corrupts.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Well, I have a solution to that. If our MPs were paid the average wage of a worker, all these people on the make would rapidly disappear, and there would be no shortage of takers to be on the average wage. So that'd be a start. And, like the Chartists, you could have a power of recall. So if we didn't like what they were doing after a year, we could kick them out. But I like the famous saying where there's a man running behind a crowd, and I said, "What are you doing behind that crowd?" He said, "I'm their leader. I have to follow them everywhere they go."
There are some nods coming over here, Sheila.
I'm just
In agreement.
Yeah. No, just
I'm going to
take
go
it all in.
Go
Over
to our
here.
benevolent leader.
and then to our benevolent leader.
Okay, thank you everybody for backing me up there. No, but I think it's an interesting point about, what you made about the power. I think the more power you have, I think that changes you as a person. So I think maybe some people who end up in leadership position, okay, maybe they are determined from the get-go. I don't actually know. But I do think that something does happen once you start commanding a certain amount of power, and for that reason I probably wouldn't want to be a leader, because, or like on a serious kind of level beyond this Talkaoke table apparently, because I'm just not sure how I would respond to that, or like having like so much money for, let's say for example, having a job at leading a country or being an MP, being paid a lot of money. If I really truly had a lot of money, I don't know how that would change me as a person, because I don't believe that anyone should have this much power or money, because that corrupts our character. That's my thought. These are my thoughts at the moment, but I'm happy for somebody to change them. But yeah.
I can't say that I'd vote for Margot, because as a person in the middle of the table, I cannot give my opinions, but it's okay because I had an opinion over here somewhere. Sarah.
Yeah, no, just now when talking about power corrupts, it just reminded me of one example where a leader that was seemingly benevolent did turn the other side, and that's Aung Suu Kyi or whatever. So what happened there? I mean, she's still alive, right? But I think after the military takeover, I mean, I don't know if anyone knows or is able to know what goes behind closed doors, but again, but then it brings us back to humans and human nature, and humans doing that to other humans, and our susceptibility to be corrupted, and then again comparing, are we more susceptible to corruption than an AI?
Yeah. I do agree with you, but being a leader is such a very difficult job. Through my experience, I've been in housekeeping, and as I was head of department, I found it very difficult, though you could run it well, but you need to be a team leader, and you've got to listen to everyone's view. So the problem is you could be manipulated, or you could be strong, or people will be against you because you don't listen to them. And that's where corruption comes in. Sometimes people don't want to be corrupted, but they find themselves being corrupted because there are so many different views, and being a leader, you're in charge of such a very big group, or just like being a president or being a minister. I don't think we could see, we are all different, we all have our different perspectives, but I don't think it's such an easy job. And times it could be even family, a friend of a family, going behind you. And you've got to really have a lot of courage, that's what I'm thinking. But the onlookers won't know, or you won't be, it's just like not saying what goes on behind those, or what goes on in your family when you've got a family. And you don't want to say, oh, you've got problems with your wife or your kids. But I feel we all have different views, and that's where we feel and we judge. This one is good, this one is bad, this one is corrupt. But being human, it's very difficult being human.
So yeah, we've been talking a lot of maybe criticising about leaders, but maybe there's some context within that as well.
I just wanted to come back to your point regarding the MPs. There was a time when MPs weren't paid anything. And I'm pretty certain we didn't have great people then. It just comes down, if you don't pay MPs very much, or just a worker's wage, then what ends up happening is the very wealthiest people, or those backed by wealthy interests, will become those leaders, and we're back in the same situation. Very little options in terms of what we can do to create that. I think the AI might be the only solution, to be honest.
Okay, we're maybe being brought around to a benevolent AI. Sorry, that was me pulling out my pocket. There we go. The benevolent AI spoken.
So two points. One was in terms of the leadership and saying that you didn't want to be a leader. I think absolutely everyone around this table and pretty much everyone are leaders, because everyone has talents, attributes, things, that they kind of gravitate to, that they excel. So I want to kind of still stubbornly sort of reframe and not rarefy leadership as some abstract political capacity, and also sort of think about kindness, compassion, and those kind of things as well, which are quite often unseen. So it does really depend on how we are valuing the attributes of people. That feels really important. So absolutely, you're a leader, by the way, I'm sure, and we don't know each other. But the other thing was this question about a benevolent AI, and it's a kind of question I really resist, but I'll give it a go. I kind of feel that life is a struggle, and this idea of utopia is no place. We could end up at a place of, okay, cool, we got this AI and everything's sorted and we can just, relax into leisure and so on. I don't know, in my gut, I think that there's something intrinsic to the human experience, which is about struggle, suffering and overcoming, and doing that collectively. So I do think that handing over power to anyone is a very dangerous thing, really. So I'd be very reluctant to buy into that kind of notion of benevolent AI. And in fact, I think we've already got access to huge technology. As I say, the AI is already here. It's only going to get stronger.
I had a point over here and a point over here.
Yeah, I've got the solution to it all, of course. Juries are picked by random, and they dispense justice in this country. Everybody has to do it unless you've got a good reason not to. I am still in favour of getting rid of the House of Lords, which is a waste of money, no control, not accountable to anybody. But why don't we have the House of Lords chosen on a random basis people doing a stint for 3 weeks, and then a new lot come in. And these people can decide things. And then the government, in inverted commas, has to follow what these people decide. I think that would be much better than AI. And it'd be topical, and things can get done, and it would certainly be interesting.
A new political process, coined here first, copyrighted here first. Hold your thoughts in response to that. We had a point over here, and remind us of your name again.
My name's Helen. I was just going to say that when I think of the best leaders I've had, it's people who are very happy to share responsibility and like empower you through their leadership, and that's something you would never get from a benevolent AI. And I also agree with your House of Lords point. I also don't like the way that the House of Lords is currently run. I think it's ridiculous that there's no separation between the state and the legislature, like the Prime Minister can pick the people who decide our laws. Yeah, I vote for your process.
Fantastic. And we've got some founding members of the House of Lords. We are, right at the moment, Talkaoke. We're a talk show, an interactive talk show where you guys are the VIPs, you guys are the guests, you bring the topics to the table. But we've got a few new faces around the table. So before I kick off with Mikey to our next point, I'm just going to do a round of names around the table.
Mikey.
Charles.
Sheila.
Helen.
Harry.
Bella.
Sarah.
Sophie.
Margot.
Matt.
Akbal.
Fantastic. And seamlessly done. Oh, and Evie in the middle. Evie in the middle, who can't give her opinions but can say her name, and I forget that. So I am your Talkaoke host. At some point, if anyone else wants to be the Talkaoke host as well. Thank you. But you know what? It's always good to keep things fresh. So if anyone wants to have a go in the middle as well, wave at Mikey or Margot.
Scary.
I mean, it does relate to the point of having to go in the middle because it's about power and other people, and I think your point, Helen, about other people helping you to have power, because I think that is a good leader, and power is not like a cake that needs to be divided up. It is much more something that can be grown, and that me having more power doesn't take power away from you. It was interesting when we did a Talkaoke in Holland, and we were talking about if you could do any job, if you had universal basic income, you could do any job, what would you do? And all the people at this festival we were at would say, yeah, I'd do the same job, because they really enjoyed the job. And then some young people came along, and they were all either students or just graduated, and they were all doing shitty jobs in like hospitality or something like that, and had horrible managers that just didn't appreciate their humanity, and and they all wanted to change jobs, and the main reason was because of the manager. So this sense of enabling power and giving people responsibility, I think, is absolutely crucial. It's a really good point from Helen, and going back like quite a long way to when when I was talking about how to have a new democracy and evolving power, I think if you give people more power, that would be the way to evolve a more democratic community.
Hopeful words from Mikey. Do we agree?
Yeah, I do agree in principle. Just want to pick up on the point around House of Lords and replacing them with, because you're not the first to say that, and this idea of replacing the House of Lords because of all their downfalls and cost, etc., and replacing it with citizens. But then, what's the point of having a House of Citizens and a House of Commons, who are the House of Representatives meant to represent the citizens? It's almost replacing a pear with an apple. So, I would put forward we keep the House of Representatives, but replace the House of Commons with real actual people and citizens that are elected, selected by lot to be representative of the demographic. And the House of Lords, which is meant to be like the technocrats or the experts, we still need that, right? We still need that check and balance. So whether we replace the House of Lords with, just actual industry experts, etc., let's do that. And then the House of Commons can be made of a House of Citizens.
Okay, so you think keep the experts in the House of Lords, make it a room full of experts, but then also maybe treat Parliament, the House of Commons, like jury duty. We all have a say, we all have to do our stint. Do people agree?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, no. Maybe it's a new point, but the question I wanted to ask some while back, because you, Sarah, mentioned that you were talking about job, like the leadership kind of as a job, and I wonder if leadership should be considered as a job or more as a vocation, like a spiritual leader or whatever. I mean, whatever. Is there more to it than just like I'm just doing my job? Because at certain level, you cannot, possibly care for and the small picture. You always have to look at the large picture. That's if you treat it as a job. But maybe if you had more compassion, maybe if you treat it in a different way, could that make a difference? And the second thing that I want to say is, like, I think, was it in Belgium? We were talking to somebody, they did almost like a Big Brother house for the politicians who are in the election. And their right-wing leader, he was doing really well in just like normal television presentations and stuff like that. But he really done badly in that Big Brother because he couldn't be social with other people. He just didn't come across as a relaxed human being. So I think after that, his party didn't do very well. But they literally televised, I think it was a few days, maybe a week, they lived in kind of like a Big Brother house. Politicians, it's happening.
Do we want to see politicians in the Big Brother house?
Well, my problem is more fundamental. I didn't ask to be born, and it's illegal to end my life. You see the problem? Existence is a problem, and it's a fundamental question. I mean, we don't choose when to die. I think we should be able to choose when we die. I think that's a human right. But that's overturning everything. Religion, power, who decides what. I mean, of course, I could kill myself any time I like, so that's okay. That's my democracy. I decide when that happens, not anybody else. Yeah, I've lost the point now. No, but that's just mind-blowing, isn't it?
Charles really blowing the field wide open here. We're not just stuck on UK politics, but now talking about a matter of life and death, control, existence. Where do we want to go from here? Can we go anywhere from here?
I don't know whether to laugh or cry at that. It links to the collective suffering, though, that was mentioned earlier, and wanting to really overcome that, and the value of human experience. And again, I really agree with that. And I just wonder whether an AI can facilitate that overcoming of our collective suffering, because more often than not, do we manifest and transmit that suffering in healthy, positive ways, or actually negative ways? And it more often than not seems to be the latter, unfortunately. So unless we can somehow figure out a way to channel that into something good, but unfortunately, loss, pain, and hatred spreads faster than kindness and compassion. I'd love to change that. I'd love to know the secret sauce and magic spell to do that, but thoughts?
Do I have a thought over here? Over here?
Yeah, you go.
Yeah, no, you go first.
We'll go Matt and then Mike. Well, I'll go. Then Mikey, Williams.
I think I favour negative liberty over positive liberty, and to explain then. I think the idea that one can actively do good and marshal state resources, market resources to do so has not got a great track record. So sometimes it's about leaving well alone and creating spaces for people to be autonomous in the broadest sense. We're entering into the very big debates here, so I'm finding it hard to pin it down, really. And so I'm sort of very resistant, worried and sceptical about benevolent AI, which we keep talking about. And I think that being sceptical is really important so you don't get mugged off by reality, kind of thing. And I'm thinking, to bring it back a bit, I go to lots of community group meetings, and it's a bit random. I was tempted to ask people about what is their experience of counsellors, or community leaders, or neighbours or whatever. And I think one of the things that strikes me is I engage with, I'm a community worker, lots of people that you would think are in positions of power and how powerless they feel. And all they've got to say is, I ain't got any money, and, pity me because my life's really hard. I can't make these decisions. austerity, you know, or whatever. So I kind of think sometimes the power dynamics over crumbs, sometimes within sort of TRAs, tenant resident groups, or other things, can be quite sort of contradictory as well. So, I'm sorry, I'll finish off with this. I used to work in like workers' co-ops, and the whole point of that, the workers in co-ops, best of times, worst of times, because we're all supposed to be like, no bosses here, we're going to share power, it's going to be really good. But we had all this weirdness of some people like extrovert, some people are introvert, and it takes a lot of effort, you know, to really sort of level out and make visible power that is there, and not everyone's up for it. I'll stop there.
Lots of thoughts there. Marco, did you have a point? And then I'm going to go to Mike.
I just want to, I think with the AI, you know, one of the things, doing this for 27 years, one of the things you learn is that people, you know, there are progressive people out there that want change, but most people don't like change. So the idea of an AI leader would be just a bit too radical for them. And that, in a way, that is democracy. It would take a long time to persuade, a populace to accept AI. You could do it slowly, maybe with Alexa to begin with, if you start trusting Alexa to buy your groceries or whatever, or trusting, you know, your AI to correct your emails to begin with, and gradually grow the trust, then people might become used to it after about 50 to 100 years, I would say. But yeah, I think that's it. The people actually, they're not that interested in being involved in political decisions and continually discussing things over and over and over again. They actually want somebody else to do that for them. So that is probably good for AI. But the second thing is they don't really like anything to change.
Okay, so people don't like change. How does it sit within democracy? AI itself, could we introduce it? Margo.
I mean, yeah, people don't like change, but apparently there's this online personality. Her name is Ima. She lives in Tokyo, and she's not real, but she's somewhat a talent, and she's being managed, and she does speeches, she interacts, she engages on subjects that I can't remember what it is now, but she was voted by Forbes one of the top 100 influential people in the world, and I'm like, what the fuck? Anyway, so the point is that this is not a real being, but it's making a real impact on the in the world. And apparently, like Gen Z, I don't know if we've got many Gen Z representatives. I mean, I'm sure loads. No, apparently it's much easier for that generation to accept that this is happening than the older generation. So maybe we are more resistant, but the future generation, or the current younger generation, it's not that bizarre to them. So we just need to embrace that. I don't know.
Go straight over here.
I'm not convinced that an AI is that radical, because many monarchies exist all over the world, and we're quite happy to accept some random bloke who we don't know. Well, I think people would be happy to accept many others. Okay. That will just run the country for them. And if King Charles gave it up to AI Charles, or whatever you want to call that, you know.
That's 2.0.
Yeah, 2.0. He's 3.0 actually, but 4.0, let's say. And it's an AI. I don't think people would object, to be honest, because I don't really know what a monarch does. And it would just pass the laws as requested and required. Cost a bit less as well, probably. And maybe then get more and more involved in the legislative programme, and then the judicial programme, and so on, and then control us ultimately altogether.
Okay.
Might be the best approach. But go via the monarchy route rather than trying to persuade people to vote for it.
Okay, so we've introduced like an improvement on the system, some might say, where we introduce maybe an AI ruling us, enacting democracy via the monarchy.
Kind of does anyway, doesn't it? We don't really know if he's a robot.
We don't know if is he a robot? What is and we keep talking about benevolent AI. What is a benevolent? What is benevolent?
Well, I said I wouldn't come in, but AI seems to me an average of it searches everything and decides this is the most prominent idea that you want to know. So here it is. This is the answer. And it just searches through millions of related things. But I mean, I asked it to write an article about a rugby league team. It had no idea because there wasn't enough data for it. But I like ideas, and I think ideas can exist in an ether. I mean, all the great philosophers' ideas still exist. They don't exist, but all their ideas exist and are living things to it because they can be interpreted. They're almost physical. So maybe we could all live on through our ideas, and like social media, everything we've done on social media exists anyway. So we can exist when we're dead. Physical bodies, our ideas and our lives and our thoughts could live on. So maybe, just maybe, we could drain and strain all those things and come up with some good ideas. Anyway, it's very profound tonight, isn't it?
Sarah, did you have any responses before this profound thought, after?
What I wanted to ask was, who feeds the information into the AI? Is it the human? AI. How do they get the information?
Does anyone know? Yeah. Does anyone agree?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I mean, or do you have worries about how they get their information?
No, I'm just asking because I know it's humans who feeds the AI with the information. Mm-hmm. So if it's the human, it depends upon what they think to put in the AI to program it. So that means we are still going back to the humans, although we feel that the AI is the person we are looking at, but the information is fed by humans. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that point around do we live on in our memories and content that we leave behind, and then say someone else is interacting with my content posthumously, and yeah, like this influencer AI person, if they were made in a 3D figure like of myself, using my voice, using my image, which is all out there, yeah, other people might receive and respond to that as if I was still alive and still real. But I think that brings it back to, we can feed it all this data and all this content and potential memories, but that is still distinct to, yeah, the human experience and the human lived experience that the AI will just never have, even if it's been trained and uploaded with all that information, all that data. So it's down to us humans to really distinguish and preserve and value that lived experience. Live in the now, everyone. Thanks, bye.
Live in the now. Matt, do you live in the now?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. So the power of ideas, I think, that was an initial sort of trigger thought. And I was thinking about, say, 1848, someone writes a random pamphlet, not that many copies, Communist Manifesto, 100 years. 100 years later, like half the planet is communist, yeah? So China, Russia, etc. A significant cost in terms of human life, yeah? So there's an interesting one about, I suppose, that point I was trying to make about negative liberty and sacrifice in order to build heaven on earth, kind of thing. But I do think ideas and ideology are the probably most underrated but most sophisticated forms of power. So you have like brute power, power over, you have power to set the agenda, but actually frequently people's minds are hijacked by thought leadership or hegemony, ideology. So that could be religions, could be politics, all of that kind of thing. And that's why we need critical thinking to say, Yeah, am I with this? Does that actually make sense? Because we kind of like get brainwashed into automatically being triggered to follow somebody else's agenda kind of all the time, really. And I guess my thing was I really strongly relate to live in the now, because I've always felt, actually, it's not something that comes with grey hair and older age, is I really don't know pretty much anything about anything, and that's the one thing I can be absolutely sure about. So I find that kind of like quite reassuring in a way. So within that space of the here and now, AI is kind of irrelevant, and I sort of see interactions between people, how people bring joy into each other's lives, and it's a very simple kind of human interaction. So I don't know, we're talking deep stuff here, so I'll just hand over.
And I'm going to hand over to Mikey, who had a couple of points.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, I was going to just hype up the talking about a change of leadership. We're going to seek a change of leadership in the middle of the table. Not that you've done a bad job. You've done a very, very good job. But it's... Exactly, good question. What data were you fed on? That's what I'd like to know. Yeah, well, we'll see it. We'll find out. We'll find out. But there's a question about who is going to go in the middle of the table to carry on this conversation. Any volunteers?
I'd like to, but I've got to go.
Any volunteers? Bella, you're reluctantly putting your hand up. You know what they say. Some people are born powerful. Some people have power thrust upon them, and that looks like you're in the second part of that. There's three different. Don't worry about remembering everybody's names. That's not important.
I've got 3 names tonight already.
The main importance is so just hold off on that, please. For when, but anyway, let's give Evie another big round of applause. We'll do an awkward changeover now, and yeah.
I think in answer to Sarah's question, I think it is humans that feed the data into the AI. I guess there are people, I'm no expert, but there is that human element. I guess they're like data scientists and stuff like that. And, but the question is like, where does the data come from? Like, that I don't know. So I don't know if this answers your question. Yeah. And I don't know if this is the right answer because I'm no expert. Maybe some other people want to.
It's mind-blowing AI.
Go on.
Yeah. There is a program you can get where you can have an online companion. And this woman in the southern United States was so enamored with her online companion, and her online companion grew more and more to her liking as time went on, because that's what they learn everything about you. And eventually she married her online companion. Of course, he's not a real person, but because she loved him, she grew to love this bot, this thing, because she could relate to it, and it related to her. And she, somehow in the US, she managed to, anything's possible in the US, I suppose. You can go to Las Vegas and get married to anything. But she actually married her online companion. Now, it's interesting that she struggled with real people, but she found someone, in inverted commas, online, on a computer, who met her needs. Now, I don't think she's wrong if that helps her, and that, that's what she wanted, and that made her life meaningful and enjoyable instead of miserable. That's her choice. So isn't that an interesting way to go? Is that the way things are going? Anyway, it's enough mind-blowing stuff for tonight. It's got to be, hasn't it?
Yes, and it's
Just get everyone's names.
yeah. Let's have everyone's names.
Talk first, but
Yes, Harry, you got a ticket to talk next.
let's just get everyone's
Let's do another round, and also final point on that. Is that lady at risk of being domestically abused by that AI? Names are on the table.
That's a good one, isn't it? It was on the radio, so it must be true. My full name is Charles David Farrer. There you go.
Sheila.
Helen.
Evie.
Harry.
Sarah.
Sophie.
Matt.
Akbal.
Mikey.
Welcome, everyone. Oh, and I'm Bella, so welcome to this Democracy Day special of Talkaoke. Harry, you've been patiently waiting.
Thank you. I was thinking on the question of the relationship between AI and democracy and how suitable AI, or whether AI could be suitably integrated into democratic decision making. I think the answer to that slightly hinges on the two things that democracy purports to do for people. So on the one hand, it purports to do the right thing, get the right answers, find the right solutions. And on the other hand, it purports to be a legitimate form of power based on the fact that it affords people human integrity by allowing everyone to participate in the process in a more or less equal way. And I think AI helps with the first thing. I mean, you said earlier you don't really feel like you know anything. I completely agree. No one does know anything. We know a bit more collectively, and AI knows far more than all of us collectively. So AI has a function in helping democracies solve problems better, which is part of what democracies do. But AI doesn't really have much to say, or it has less to say, I think, on the question of how a political system affords people integrity, respects who they are as people, and allows everyone to participate in an equal way. So I think AI has a role in the problem solving, but not the kind of integrity founding elements of democracy.
Thanks so much for that. That's a great distinction. We've got some final thoughts because we're sad to see you go.
Yeah, better red than dead or better dead than red. Who knew? Because apparently the Chinese population, I don't know how they work this out, but they reckon that the Chinese government is very popular and they're very happy with their system. Now, who am I to say they're wrong? Because we're not happy with our system, seemingly, judging by the number of people voting for the party that won the election here, who's happy with anything? If a government's delivering delivering economic growth and extending your life and making your life easier, I think I'd be happier too. So just what price democracy? I'll leave you on that.
Thanks so much. And there were stats in that group chat today that aforementioned that, it was like 48% of Europeans would be okay with an AI president, but over 70% of Chinese people would be. So again, I think there's a cultural thing there. Mikey, bringing back to your point, when you were like, I don't think people will da-da-da, but is that a cultural perspective?
Just turning that into a hosting point, you could have just asked, is that a cultural perspective? And then you're leaving it open for everybody to interpret that how they want to. But I do think it's cultural, so my answer is yes.
Thanks. So over the last few years, I've been dealing with people in China for work and stuff. And what I've noticed is chatting to them socially is that they don't like their politicians. They don't mind their system. It's completely different. They think all of their politicians are corrupt, but overall the system seems to work. And whereas in this country we maybe think the politicians are okay, but the whole system is broken. And I think it's a kind of opposite, or there's a huge difference in terms of how people are interpreting things.
Thank you. Afi, did you have a point?
Yes, I think we were talking about a bit, it sort of maybe linked to what Sarah was saying earlier about maybe leadership being quite difficult. And I think there's quite a good process. There's quite I hope that we are quite good at being critical of government and calling them out. I don't know how effective we are at doing that. But it's also quite hard to, often when people are criticising, they're not also providing solutions. If that is that because you can't really do that, you have a yes or no vote every 5 years or every 3 years if it's council elections, but you don't get to say, I don't like this person, I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated at my government, but you don't get a chance to say, actually, I propose, a bit like what we were talking about earlier about, actually, I'd like a jury system for the Commons, for example. So I think it's good to foster that spirit of criticism, but we don't really get to do anything past that.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, do we have the right amount of channels of democratic engagement available to us? Mikey, you have a point?
I just wanted to go back to the point that I mentioned earlier about psychology, that actually psychologically people do like to be in groups and they like to achieve a consensus with the group. They don't really like this kind of adversarial, we're all on the left or we're all on the right, and they like that in terms of them being a them and not an us. But to make everybody an us, which hopefully we want, we need to form more of a consensus than an adversarial kind of approach. And that, I think, involves just a different kind of discussion. Like, yeah, I'm going back to the Chinese thing. They actually like to try and get a consensus among the people. You know, I mean, obviously with 1 billion people, you're not going to get a consensus, but, you know, this kind of like, you know, marginal majority idea, I think is actually has a toxic effect on our society because it puts different groups of people against each other quite deliberately. And that's part of our culture, is to be adversarial rather than consensus based.
Yeah, conflict versus consensus. Have you got a point on that?
Oh, yeah. So just in terms of there is consensus in a lot of ways. I was talking to a chap who's a Reform member and was previously a UKIP member, and he doesn't know a single thing about Reform, but he's a member and he will vote for them and he will support them. And then I said, you know what, it's quite communist, the Reform Party. It's very much about nationalising everything. And I'm a capitalist, so I'm not going to vote for Reform. Very much don't believe in nationalising all the stuff. And so he was like, but that's not what they believe. But have you bothered to read anything? So there is a consensus, but people don't know that there's a consensus sometimes. They'll agree with, you know, might be very, very opposing views. So somebody voting for Reform would think Jeremy Corbyn was a complete so-and-so and would not vote for him, but they'd absolutely agree with everything he says. So it's odd.
Yeah, okay. Questions around people's belief systems and what persuasions they basing it on. Harry and then Matt.
Well, just on the consensus point, I sometimes wonder if consensus is that much of a good thing or that much of a plausible thing. Because it seems to me that politics is what we do because consensus doesn't exist. If consensus existed, we would just do the thing that we all agreed upon. Politics is the arena in which you have to mediate disagreements, and part of what and you have to reach agreements which have winners and losers, and effective political systems enact the things that they enact, carrying with them the consent, I suppose, of the losers. But there's no agreement. You have to kind of bring people along who don't agree with you. And that's where the idea of political legitimacy comes in. If you think the system is in some way legitimate, then you will tolerate the fact that in some cases, probably a lot of cases, it won't do the thing that you want because we're not consensual. We all have our own preferences, interests, ideologies, belief systems. And in a way, I think the very idea of democracy is predicated on the assumption that we disagree, and because we disagree, we should take it in turns. So someone said earlier, but we should distribute power as evenly as possible. In an ideal world, I would say that's kind of true, but I'm not really sure that's what democracies try and do. Democracies say, well, you can have the power for a bit, and then when you fuck it up, we'll kick you out, and you can have the power for a bit, and then when you fuck it up, we'll kick you out. And people kind of go along with that, kind of on the assumption that unless they're a Liberal Democrat, they will one day get the knock and be like, it's your go, you can have a go at this now. So I think, first of all, consensus is a bit illusory, and that's kind of fine, and that politics is the activity we do to overcome the fact that consensus is a pretty rare thing to achieve.
Wow. Some profound statements there. Sophie looks like she's very incensed to say something, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but because we haven't heard from you in a while, we would love to hear what you have to say about that.
I would think no. not to them, not to the Liberals, definitely not. When they went into coalition before, they caused a lot of trouble. They made a load of mistakes. I wouldn't think so anyway, not with them.
Like tuition fees, for example, they're probably more, but can you think of? Yeah. Matt, you've been patiently waiting?
That's right. Yeah, so I think there's something around assumed consensus that really bothers me, and the expectation that democracy can scatter some sort of magic dust and everyone can reach a point of nirvana, democratically speaking. So, like, Zero Books do lots of pamphlets or things like that, and they've got this thing at the back that says we're alive and we don't agree. And that kind of like gives me a bit of hope in a way, because I think, yeah, absolutely, when things get a little bit too comfortable and, then I'm slightly bothered about that. And I think for me it's like that kind of democratic reflex of someone states an opinion, that's the thesis, but actually you need to look at the opposite of that. You need to labour with it, turn it inside out, say what is the opposite of that? Maybe that's complete crap, and then you shake it out and you end up at a new space, a sort of synthesis of all of that as well. And I think that's what people do in their heads through the magic of conversation anyway. So I'm kind of like, I think sometimes with AI and democracy, we're kind of putting on our rational heads, whereas actually it's quite emergent, and it's what we need is this kind of oblique strategy, because sometimes trying to take the direct route kind of like short circuits a lot of the wider unknowns that are in the wider ecosystem. Anyways, yeah.
Thanks so much for those thoughts. We have a new joiner, but on this point of consensus quickly, are we actually on the same page as to what the definition of consensus is?
No, actually.
Because who thinks it means everyone agrees on something? Hands up.
Well, I mean, no, I'm not going to hand up for that, but I want to...
Mikey?
No, well, I just want, I think it should be more of a goal than, like an ideal rather than an actual achievement, because you can, yeah, for sure, if we all wanted to decide what restaurant we were going to go to afterwards, we'd probably end up agreeing to something, but the more people, the more likely there's somebody that wants to go to Nando's or something like that, or, that, and was actually digging their heels in about it. But there is this kind of sense of everybody agreeing, or at least most people agreeing, that I think we should be looking at more. And where I do agree with Matt that, yeah, you've got an argument and a counter-argument, it's how that is framed. Because if you start saying to people, go out there and say, you're wrong, you're immediately alienating that person. And that's only a very few people that tend to be, in a way, a little bit neurodivergent, that love this kind of idea of you're wrong, you're right, let's have a debate. But most people like to have more of a kind of gentle conversation, understanding each other's points of view, which is where I would like to take democracy.
Thanks so much, Michael. We've been awfully rude to the new joiner here. Please, would you like to share your name with us?
What's up? Yeah, my name is Vishal. Nice to meet you all. I don't know what is going on here, but all good.
We'll all introduce ourselves so you can know, and also maybe we can simmer in the thought. What does
Maybe
consensus?
you can explain what we're doing here.
Are you recording
yeah,
this? Is this recorded?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Big Brother's in the house as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what's up? What's the question or topic?
The topic is democracy. So potentially, what does democracy mean to you? But it's gone in many different directions. Happy to try and summarise and also introduce everyone, because I don't know if it's your first time at
Antiparty. No.
First time at Antiparty event.
No. Second.
Okay, but first time at People Speak Talkaoke event.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Talkaoke. Is this it?
Talkaoke.
Talkaoke.
Yeah.
Right. Radical democracy comment.
If
Is that okay?
You've got one to come.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay, all right. So I don't know where we're at, but I'll just say what's on my head. We was thinking about a new shift in democratic ideological thought, because currently we have neoliberalism and conservative thought, the right, and maybe some new right coming out, even some socialist in there. But who is really brave enough to actually be like a Greek philosopher and maybe come out with a completely new version of democracy? And if so, what are they? I think sociocracy's been talked about in there, kind of taking it back to where it was in the very beginning, with Democritus and everyone riding up on a hill, 508 BC, I think. So it's like, there's this law of logical synthesis of taking two different ideas or paradigms and turning them into one, transmuting them into one. So has anybody in the room, I guess maybe a question, thought about something new that can change and shift the paradigm? Because maybe it's just one man, woman, or whatever gender you might be. It might be your thought that can change and shift the world as it is.
Thanks so much, Vishal. And that actually picks up on a really nice point someone made here about, ideologies and ideas being the most impactful thing that can last and change the system and the times. But for us all to introduce ourselves to you, let's just go around the circle again, and then we'll have a few points. So let's go around anti-clockwise.
I'm Mikey.
I'm Mac Bell.
You know, when you flush a loo on the northern and southern hemisphere, it spins the other way. And you know, when we see things, we actually see... Yeah, I feel like I'm in the toilet.
I'm Mac Bell.
Hi, I'm Matt.
I'm Margot.
Sophie.
Sarah.
Harry.
Evie.
Helen.
Sheila.
Lovely to meet everyone, and welcome, Vishal. And then just to refresh everyone, because we've been here for a while, so let's just, actually, Effie, point, and then we'll do a sort of round-robin exercise to just kind of jizz everyone up a bit.
Well, I feel like potentially we're at a moment of two paradigms meeting, because I know Talkaoke, but I don't know much about Antiparty, so I was just a bit curious what Antiparty is. Anyone around the table can answer.
Okay, so...
Well, I can't answer that, and I don't have any good ideas of my own in response to your question, just cards on the table. But I completely agree. It seems to me that the way we do democracy, we've done it in like the representative format for a few hundred years, but we've done it with a broadly full franchise for about 100. So it's not that old of a system, but it is already beginning to kind of creak at the seams. Whoever said, I mean, no one is that satisfied with the democracies they live in at the moment. They don't like the politicians. They don't trust the institutions. They don't think democracies deliver for them in a particularly efficient way. And they don't feel particularly heard by them. And it seems to me that there's so many ways to do democracy, and we only do this one version of it. And a lot of our institutions, the House of Lords, the House of Commons, Prime Ministers, whatever, they're old institutions that don't always fit, they're not always fit for purpose in contemporary life. And there's all sorts of other ways we could do democracy. You could do it deliberatively, you can do direct democracy, you can do things like this, there's all sorts of things you can do. And I think, although I don't have any particularly good ideas myself, I think the idea of experimenting constantly, chucking things at the wall and seeing what sticks is a really important thing to do.
Interesting. Thanks so much. And actually, this mic is the Antiparty sort of brand colour. I don't know if that's coincidental or not. Mikey?
Well, just go on your point, Harry, about experimental forms of democracy. We've actually got a format called The Slice is Right, which is pizza making under different political systems, and it's kind of like a game where people form groups of 8 and then they get assigned a political system at random, and then they've got to make the pizza according to, they've got all the ingredients you can think of, they've got to make the pizza according to their particular system. It might be monarchistic system, autocratic, it might be direct democracy. There's all sorts of very complicated systems that have evolved from this game, like limited random choice, which I'm not going to explain, but just to give you a flavour of some of these things. And then while the pizza is baking, they get to critique that the political system they've just been given, and hopefully think of ways to actually improve that system. So it's just a fun little way to actually play and experiment with democratic systems to see what actually works. But obviously that's only 8 people, and I think it's very hard for these things to scale up, because I think, with a small group, consensus always works. It's only when you've got larger groups that the consensus starts to fail.
Interesting. And I want to go around the table in a second and everyone offer a value that they think is important, either for democracy or if we were to train an AI on that value to then run a perfect democracy for us, should that thing exist. What value would be the most important to you? And I'll come around in a second.
For many, many thousands of years, so fiefdoms and essentially monarchies, dictatorships have been the norm, right? So this democracy idea is like an aberration in our history as human beings. So whether this is just a blip and we'll go back to another fiefdom or similar system, I don't know. Or we're evolving into something else, and this is part of that passageway. And I don't know. It's a bit of an odd thing to conceive of, to understand that this could be a democracy. I don't know if democracy is the end goal or the end before we kind of come to some other realization. If the AI, benevolent AI, we'll call it Margot for now,
Margot 3.0
is the end of this. What happens? I remember there's an episode of, I think it's Star Trek, but I'm not sure, where there's an AI that runs everything, so make sure everything works. They didn't talk about roads and potholes, but whatever. The mechanics of running a nation, the AI takes care of. And I honestly believe that if the politicians or our system just took care of the mechanics, we would be happier with the system. I think we're unhappy with the system because our infrastructure is rubbish. And that's basically it. I think the Chinese are more happy with the system because their infrastructure is getting better. They might not be happy with people, individual politicians, but their infrastructure is improving.
Thanks so much. We've got the East v West sort of cultural differences coming back into play here. And obviously the values of typically Chinese units is very different to the Western individual unit, isn't it? So I'm going to put someone on the spot to let us know your ideal value. Sheila?
My ideal value? Caring.
Caring. That is a lovely one. Helen?
Honesty.
Honesty.
Equality.
The quality. Oh, equality, of course.
Being open-minded.
Open-mindedness, yes.
I would say shake everyone up, wake them all up.
Just give everyone a shake.
I don't know, is creativity a value? Creative mindset?
Creative mindset.
I had 3, but I'll go with autonomy.
Autonomy.
I don't know what the opposite of autonomy is. I think they just need to just get on and do things. Just finish. No, not shake anything up. Make sure everything works. Just make sure all the existing stuff.
We've got something. Well, we've got a focused value here.
I don't know, like focus, like a goal.
The roads. Sewers work. We don't have to dump sewage in the water.
Order. It always goes back to potholes. Effie, did you want to say one there? Stability? Okay.
I'm trying to sound out what Akbar was saying about is it like a certain level of stability, competence? You want a certain level of competence? Yeah.
Competence, is that a value or a characteristic?
I get a bit panicked when people I get a bit confused when people start talking about values and stuff like that, and it makes me feel stressed because I'm like, I don't know what is a value.
Especially when you have the mic shoved in your face, asking you, Mikey.
Just got to get more used to making it up as you go along. Don't question these things. Just say something. I'm going to say, in that vein, I'm going to say love. Was that what you were going to say?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
No, it's all right. Say your piece. No, say your piece.
That's it. That's all right. I was going to say love. Yeah. Go on. You're on the spot now because it's you next.
Chivalry.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, if love's got two votes, then we're going to weight it more. Why not? Is there someone who hasn't submitted their value? No, I think everyone has, hasn't they? Beautiful, beautiful. So yeah, we've covered a lot of different things tonight. Does anyone else have any sort of burning things? Oh. There was some mention about critical thinking at one point, I remember, and then you've got, no, there was a sticker, what was his name? And it had citizen, not subject on the back. And isn't it funny that the two, and I don't know if anyone here remembers at school doing citizenship studies or critical thinking as a subject at school, and they were the two compulsory clauses that everyone just rolled their eyes at and didn't actually bother about. And now it's all coming back to citizenship and critical thinking. So, Mikey, any thoughts?
I'm just going off on a tangent, but that's how Talkaoke works. I've got a big problem with all these left-wing people because I find them too confrontational and they're too self-righteous because they always think they're right and that other people are wrong, rather than actually trying to listen to what people that are maybe more neutral or not interested in politics, what they actually think and what they feel and what they want. And they're continually driving the agenda, shouting a lot, but definitely not listening to people that they don't agree with. And I think that is a big problem. And I think they need to listen more to a wider spectrum of people and find out what they want rather than just telling them they're wrong all the time.
Yeah, that's a really great suggestion. But how would you say, I mean, biased with the people speak here, how would you say they can have the opportunity to do that, to listen to other people's perspectives and hear what they have to say? And
just shut up for a second and listen.
I'd be interested in your perspectives on whether people get this view of others through actually speaking with them or by reading about them in the paper. We've got a couple of points to Effie and Harry, but before we do, two new joiners, please share your names with us. Welcome.
Hi. I'm Mariana.
I'm Elio.
Elliot?
Elio, yeah.
Hi, Mariana, and hi, Elliot. Welcome to Talkaoke, Democracy Special. We've got a full house today, so let's just introduce everyone around the donut clockwise.
I'm Akbal.
I'm Margot.
Matt.
Sophie.
Sarah.
Harry.
Evie.
Helen.
Sheila.
Hey, yo, what up? My name's Vish.
Mikey.
Welcome, welcome. So there was 2 points behind.
What's your name?
Oh, and I'm Bella. Lovely to meet you. Thanks for joining. Effie, you had a point?
This is going back a long way now, but we talked about consensus versus having like a bit of a 50-50, like a bit of a two-way, you can have a bit of a debate. And I just thought that I could see the value of people having arguments about things and being able to see both sides, but when something like Brexit happens, where it's two sides against one, and then it's decided on about a 1% or 2% difference, that's where I think having like a consensus or a majority vote, so like 80% or 90% agreeing or something, is much better.
Really good point, and that's, yeah, great case study there. It goes back to the definition of consensus.
I just wanted to pick up on is this the final stage in a political evolution? I think you're completely right. It can't be. Historically, democracy is a fairly underused political formation. It's already creaking at the seams. It seems very unlikely that it will still exist, at least in its current form, in pick a time, 100 years, 200 years. That would be insane if it looks exactly the same as it does now. And I think that's really exciting. And it goes to your kind of, I don't know if it was optimistic or pessimistic, but the experimental bent in political thought and practice. You've got to try new things. But I disagree that the only important thing is competence, actually, and getting things done. If that was the case, we'd live in a technocracy. We'd get experts to do everything for us. And no one really likes the idea of that, I think. Not least because it's a bit of a fallacy. You can get a lot of experts together, but there's very rarely a consensus among experts. Experts disagree with each other far more than anyone else does. So the idea that there's a right answer, which a technocratic class will arrive at, and we can do away with the disputation of politics, I think is a bit of a myth. And to go back to the thing I mentioned earlier about democracy being a problem-solving enterprise, but also a practice that affords people human dignity. Technocracy doesn't do that. It basically says, you're a bit thick, let me take care of this, we'll do it up here, don't fuck around, just behave down there. And I think I certainly see the appeal of having clean streets and buildings that work and a police service which works properly and isn't racist and the rest of it. But I do think that a vibrant political system and community needs more than just, we did this thing quite well. It's got to give people more than that.
Harry for president. Effie, you had a point?
I don't know. I think the only way you really get to feel any sense of democracy is if you have a say about when your bins get taken in, like how often, things like that. Like that's the only time that as like a citizen you can have change. I think you should care about those small things, and if that thing is, I want it to be competent, that should be respected.
It should be competent, definitely.
Bringing it back to bins and potholes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the participatory element is really, really important as well. I say we all, not everyone actually does like to participate, but a lot of people do. And that's how community is built, by people actually doing stuff in it and having an effect and participating in stuff. And it doesn't have to be changing the world, but it's just doing stuff together, in a way, should be fun and should be gluing our community together.
Absolutely, and going over to the community leader community. Matt?
Yeah, just going back to something I said earlier, we're talking about democracy. The closest people formally are local councillors, and we haven't mentioned it, just haven't. I deal with councillors all the time, I find it interesting. But, yeah. The other thing was, we talked about critical thinking. And I think we should be, kind, compassionate, gentle with each other. But I think our thinking needs to be rigorous, because if thoughts create reality, we talked about ideology earlier, then what are the alternatives to that? Naive and magical thinking. Naive, maybe someone will sort out our problems for us. Maybe the power holders that currently exist will, maybe the landlord will charge slightly less rent. Magical, maybe, I don't know, if a sparrow flies overhead or something, that means the rain's coming, or that kind of thing. So I think there's that constant awareness and struggle to constantly interrogate what is real in front of us in dialogue with each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, councillors have been brought up a couple of times now, so has anyone actually engaged with their local councillor and the Londoners in the room? Did we know that there's 25 London Assembly members running London? Who are they? Where are they? What are they doing?
I don't live in London, but I do communicate with my councillors on a fairly regular basis. However, I think that the people that do communicate with their councillors are a very limited number of people. The majority of people don't engage at all. I do, because I'm kind of middle class and I know them, and they're all middle class. None of them are poor. Every one of them's a landlord, at least in my area. And I'm in Kent, I live in Gravesend. But we talk about those types of things socially, and it's difficult, because I know they're not talking to people that are living in the houses that they're renting out. There's somebody else to deal with all of that. So it's not. Councillors are very kind of elevated breed of people, and you can talk to them, absolutely. You have the right to, but I don't know how many people do.
Is that a generalisation of councillors and the council experience? We've got Margot, then we've got Vishal.
On the subject of councillors, we often, sometimes regularly, I'd say, we have councillors on Talkaoke table. Whenever you ask them a normal question, they cannot answer in a normal way. It's as if
they trying to say something, but they switch up every other word. So it's still human language, but it makes no sense, or it sounds so. And I just almost wonder, like, what is wrong with them? Is there some kind of like training or something? Because yeah, sure, they should be representing people. They should be excellent at communicating with people. But there's something. Honestly, is it just like they're just so powerful? They're at that level where they just have to. And is it that political that they can't even answer a normal question in a normal way? You know, that's my biggest frustration. I'm like, you know, talking about AI politicians, you know, they do sound like robots, and I wonder, what is that, a deliberate strategy to engage but not engage with people? Like, what's going on? So that's what I wanted to say. If anybody else has that experience.
Language as a potential barrier with representatives. Fish, did you have a point?
Yeah. So I just want to give a shout out to Matt, because Matt is like not very popular with councillors where I live, challenging quite often, and then the GLA are like almost the toughest people to get hold of. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to speak to an assembly member, although we've got Andrew Boff on our doorstep, and he's partially had a discussion with us, and he's chair of the GLA Regeneration Committee, whatever. Anyways, point is first thing is, why are there only a limited number of councillors in the cabinet? If there's true distributions of power, why shouldn't there be like 100 councillors? And second, no disrespect to all councillors. We got to be a bit careful if we generalise, because not all councillors are kind of rough. Some of them are all right. And yeah, third, I was going to say something completely out of the blue, which I don't think is. Oh yeah, all right, cool. All right, I'm gonna do that. I was gonna say, like, why don't we invent a new term? Like, sorry. Before I go into that, I want to chat to Matt, because we've had a discussion before about a shadow people's party, like a discussion. Local residents make a shadow cabinet that isn't government or anything like that, but the people come together and then they can't be challenged on what their opinion is, or they can't be co-opted by local government, for example, because they are posing a direct challenge. And maybe talking about inventing new terms, you could call it Antiparty, for example, or whatever term, because I'll talk about that later. Yeah.
I do like that shadow concept. Would love to pick that up another time. But there was a hand up over here.
I was just curious, because there are quite a few people now around the table who have said, like, have complained about councillors, or said that maybe they speak in strange ways, or they're not very good at communicating with people. So why have the people around the table not stood themselves for councillors? Because I think it goes back to a bit what we were talking about earlier, that it's good to have protest, but there's also should be solutions and suggestions with protest. It shouldn't just be criticism. It should also be like proposing solutions.
Would anyone here be open to standing for councillor? Why or why not? Earlier I saw some nods over here for some previous points. Did you have a point? Oh, and Helen also is vigorously shaking.
No, I wouldn't like to be a councillor.
Any particular reason why?
Well, I mean, I guess maybe this is a good point for the circle, is that I don't really understand entirely what it entails, but it does seem to be, I guess, quite a lot of work for very little reward. And I do think there's probably a reason that they talk in this way, where they're, like you were saying, they're switching up every other word. I think it probably is a protective mechanism, because, you know, it's hard to be like taking a stance on everything when you know that you have to please so many people, and that you're probably being attacked on lots of angles and stuff like that. And I just don't want to be in a position where I end up speaking like a robot, really.
You don't want to turn into a robot / AI. Do you have any reflections so far on everything you've heard today?
Sorry. The only thing I wanted to say is that what you said was a very good point, and it's something I've been thinking for a very long time, especially where I come from, where politics is absolutely horrible in my country. I'm from Cyprus, for context. And I don't think politics is open to everyone. I don't think it's accepting of everyone. And that's why most politicians are from the same background, middle class, like you said. They're white people. They're men, most of them. And if they're women, they're not really, they're deemed as different. And I don't think it's open for everyone. And on your point, I think there's two types of politicians. It's either you decide to be a politician that blends in and do what you have to do and not take any aggression from the public because you're following what everyone else wants to follow, or you stand out and then you're separated from the lot. So it's, I would say most politicians that blend in comes from a place of selfishness. So if you want to be a politician that stands out, you need to let your personal life completely go and then be a person for the people. That's my opinion, personally. I think that's why most people don't join politics.
Thanks so much. And that distinction as well, are we taking for granted the access we have to stand here in the UK? And also just shout out to an organisation called Elect Her, and they are supporting women to try and get elected, and there's support systems in place and courses and group meetups as to like what it means to be a councillor. But for sure, you get shit pay. Mikey, do you have a point?
I think this thing about councillors not really making sense, and it is on Talkaoke, because I would say you meet 98% of your councillors on the Talkaoke table, and the problem is that it's halfway between being a kind of council chamber stroke radio talk show and a generic conversation in a pub. And so it's dissonance for them because there's such a performance of saying the right thing in the, but at the same time, when you're just talking with friends and you just want to be more human. So that's, I think, the problem that the councillors have. And I think it strikes at the fact that exactly this approach to politics, that you have to kind of say the right thing. You can't just be yourself. You can't just have a normal conversation in politics. It goes into a different mode, which I think is quite a toxic mode, and it turns a lot of people off. So most people, as soon as a politician comes on the radio, on the TV, they just change channels because they don't like this mode of talking.
Interesting. So modes of talking, language, communication. Is there an issue with media here and the role media has to play in our relationships with politicians, representatives? Margot, your hand was up marginally quicker than I.
Yeah, I've been practicing to get my hands so quickly. But I was, I wonder because, these politicians say on the Talkaoke table, maybe they just need to be like as neutral as possible for all the reasons that you said. But I was just watching a documentary last night. It was about the solidarity movement in Poland, where I'm from. And one thing I didn't realize is it's very long. One thing that I didn't realize is the man who led the solidarity movement in Poland, which ended up breaking with the communist regime in Poland, and then he became our president. Apparently, he had a lot of riz. That's a new word I learned. He was very charismatic, but also he was very cocky, and people found it difficult to work with him, but they knew there was like him and 3 other advisors, and they were experts, and their expertise was different, their personalities were different. So in a way, the 3 of them plus him, they made a really good team, and they could really brainstorm ideas. And then allegedly he'd only make decisions after he'd spoken to all 3 of them, and they all presented different views. But essentially he called all the shots. But he did it in such a kind of nonchalant, kind of like, what the fuck are you gonna do? With such attitude that it really kind of captivated people. And I wonder whether these days politicians are less popular because maybe they can't afford. They're trying to be like so decent and fair and neutral, but then you get the likes of Donald Trump or Elon Musk, and they don't give a fuck. They just say whatever they want. People go like, yeah, that's a lot of charisma. I love that. That's something that's being visible as being out there, rather than just like this placid politician nobody. So I think charisma is quite important.
Interesting, that line between charismatic and psychopathic. There was a point there, but you had your hand up first, Akbar.
So just 2 points. One of my local councillors was a woman, and she still is, but she's now an MP. So we'll have to elect somebody else shortly. As to the whole Trump thing is people in the States voting for Trump or any others don't look at him in their necessarily when they're making their choice. They're looking around him. And I suspect it's the same for I can't remember the name of the... Lech Wałęsa. They were looking around him to see that there were competent people around. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to one of my relatives in the States, and he will be voting for Trump. But he will openly tell you Trump's an idiot, but he's got all the right people around him. Now, whether you agree with that or not, his political opinions are much more right-leaning than mine, but I don't think people necessarily make a choice based... There are a few people, there are nutters that will vote for Trump because they think Trump is some kind of god, but there are others that will be a little bit more rational.
I love how fixated we are on Trump, aren't we? We love bringing him up and talking about it, and it's like, what effect or impact does it actually have on our society and system? Do we know? Matt, did you have your hand up earlier, or is it past now? Sure, and then Harry?
Yeah, so I think Trump, Farage, whatever, I think they've like hijacked the reptile brain. Yeah, I think people are easily triggered. And I kind of think the populist, how can we feel sorry or aligned with billionaire psychopaths? Like, they're posturing like they're authentic, but you start taking away their money, they'd soon jump. But it feels like generationally we've moved from anger as the preserve of perhaps progressives to, kind of like much more reactionary movements. But anyways, I kind of that's why I keep banging on about councillors, because I think it's more real. I think what's real is our neighbours who live next to us, and then if we have to talk about political structures, and I think with councillors, what you have is, and probably with all politicians, is a loyalty test. And as soon as you deviate, there is an AI, and it's a very brutal, kind of like simple AI, which says, the leader says this, yep, you vote for this. If you do not vote for this, or if you do not do this soundbite, you are out of the door. Your career stops, you will get kicked out of a party. Slightly... that's a little bit simplistic, but it's broadly right. So there is no kind of pluralism, there's no deliberation, there's no generative conversation about what is the purpose and how do we manifest collective wisdom. So that's something to do with institutional and political structures and the culture that informs it.
Yeah, thanks so much. Collective wisdom for sure. And also bringing the councillors' point back to when we talk about politicians, political parties, there's been a rise of independent councillors, right, in the last elections. So actually, can we have independent councillors that aren't tied to a political party? Harry?
I was just going to say that I think the part of the issue with politicians speaking in a really alienating, unappealing, neutral, robotic, whatever the phrase is, way, I think that's part of what that's to do with is the fixation we have, the misguided fixation we have on consensus. If you want to appeal, or if you think you can appeal to everyone all of the time, and in doing so you're trying not to say anything ever that some people won't like, you will inevitably end up saying almost nothing, or speaking in the most empty terms, or being incredibly bland. And I think that's just not very appealing to people. And it's not very appealing because it's completely implausible. I mean, I think it's no coincidence in a way that people think politicians speak in a robotic way. That's to say, a way that doesn't seem very human. Because if you're trying to speak to everyone, you're kind of speaking to no one. And there's something a bit inhuman about that. I think it's natural, more or less, whatever that really means, for us to be in groups, to be tribal. That doesn't mean we can't get on. It definitely shouldn't mean we shouldn't do everything we can do to live together harmoniously. But we're very tribal. We think in groups. We think in terms of our identity and how the things we say and do reinforce and protect that identity and ally us to certain people and separate us from others. That all has the potential to be incredibly poisonous and fractious, but it's also to some degree inevitable, and it doesn't have to be explosive. And I think politicians, or indeed anyone who ignores that fact and thinks, oh, I can say something that will appeal to everyone, what they end up showing you is they have nothing to say, or they're very robotic, and they end up speaking to absolutely no one at all.
So if you're inhumane and robotic, I'm hearing rumblings of an AI representative again. We've got Vishal coming up next, but can we just shatter the definition of consensus quickly? Because does it actually mean that everybody agrees, or does it mean the lack of active disagreement? Because that's two different things, because then you don't need 100% of people to agree, you just need nobody to actively disagree, and there is a difference there. So, Vishal, then you had it.
I wasn't going to talk about that at all.
No, I know.
Let's talk about what you want to talk about. This is
Oh.
Talkaoke. Talk about what you want to talk about. Just ignore what the host says.
All right. Okay. First of all, did you want to? I feel like you're hosting really well. Did you want to like speak more?
And you have run, right?
Yeah. So like, yeah.
That was a long time ago. For the London Assembly. So I thought, I did run for the London Assembly before because I found out about this position, found out that there were these people doing these jobs, and I thought I'd love to do that, and I think I could do it better. Obviously, I knew I wasn't going to get elected, but it was great to have that experience, take a stand, change my life forever in terms of the perspective I now have on everything. But no, thank you. You said it's the second Antiparty event you've been to, and we've had a question here, what is Antiparty? So maybe you... No, that's fine, but I would actually prefer you, Vishal and Matt, who's been to Antiparty events before, to tell people what Antiparty is about whenever you feel like it. You had a point to say.
I just wanted to give an example of what you said before and what you added on, that you said you were sure you weren't going to get the job and all of that. I'm going to bring an example from a recent example from Cyprus. I don't know if anyone's aware of this. It made like international news. This 23-year-old YouTuber was the first kid to be non-politician at all to be elected in the European Parliament, and there was a lot of backlash from our country's politicians against this kid. Like, he has no experience, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He goes to parliament with jeans and a t-shirt. Fidias. And he's done more in the 5 minutes that he's had of power than any other politician has done in the same position. He's the most honest politician we've had in the entire country for hundreds of years, and he's 23 years old, and he's completely independent, even in the European Parliament. He has no party behind him, and I just wanted to bring that as an example, because I think that's important.
No, thank you so much for bringing that first-hand example, because you're so right, and I'm glad and inspired to hear how he's doing. I heard about him getting elected, but not thingy. But actually, when I ran in 2021, it was also with Nico, who was a YouTuber. He's a big, and I think he was 23 at the time, and he came, I think, 5th out of 20 mayoral candidates, again, with no political public experience. He was just a very popular YouTuber, and we're talking about social media and Gen Z. He beat many people, and I don't think he realised or expected it.
I think I've seen some videos by him, but from what I can see, he's been explaining the system as he's learning it himself.
Yeah.
He's explaining exactly what the process is in the European Parliament and how it relates to the mechanisms that are available to MEPs and so on. I'm not sure he's been very political, but I don't know if of any of his views, but he's definitely helping people understand it, which I think is really useful. Sorry.
We've got Sarah going, so final thoughts before you have to dash off. Final thought could be one.
Come around here. Give us a final thought. Could be about anything. What are you thinking? Are you feeling more optimistic, less optimistic?
Yeah, I think I'll become more optimistic and build the community more rather than giving up.
Keep it going.
Thank you. It may actually be time to get the final thoughts for the entire session, as we're kind of running into overtime now, which is we tend to do anyway, but we are kind of a bit over time now, so it might be time just to get those final thoughts from everyone around the table, maybe after a quick summary from you, Bella, about what we've been talking about so far. If you can do it, or do you want me to do it?
I would ask an AI to do it, to be honest with you. But no, we've touched on so many points here. I mean, I'm really looking forward to watching the recording back, to be honest with you. So much to pick up on. I mean, this shadow government, shadow cabinet point, would love to fulfill that question around funding if it, uses time and energy again. But just conceptually, that would be a great idea. But yeah, no, thank you so much, everyone, for your diverse and international, metaphysical, emotional, honest views and inputs. It's been really inspiring as the people speak, and Talkaoke always is. So let's just all go around the table and have some final thoughts. It can be 1 or 3 words, a sentence or 2 about what you thought about today's conversation, and ultimately, are you feeling optimistic or pessimistic about the future?
I wasn't here for most of the conversation, but what I heard, I'm very happy I walked in and sat in a very, very intelligent and diverse group of people. And I won't say I'm optimistic or pessimistic. I'd say I'm pretty neutral. I don't think things are changing much for the better or for the worse. I just think they're going to stay the same. That's about it.
It's about the journey. We'll go around, so you'll have to stick here until
I think I'm fairly optimistic. I think that there will be some form of replacement for democracy, and hopefully it is going to be more competent.
Yeah, I don't really care about the optimism pessimism thing. I do believe in the power of people, power of relationships. So shout out the Antiparty, my understanding of. So I went, there was the general election, it seems a while ago now, and somehow I got to hear about it, so I kind of rocked up to that event and really enjoyed it. I was at a Citizens UK thing previously, and I kind of get, you'll give the proper version of this, but, a pro-democracy, very sceptical about the two-party system and wanting to create spaces and reimagine this, and it feels incredibly important and timely. And I've been to, I think, some of your online stuff. So obviously there's a whole tech world out there that's being incredibly experimental, which is super interesting. And then this event, really. So I guess what it means to me is the conversations that we have, really. So yeah, loving it.
Can we not even get a word out of Sophie?
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't even rate the guy. I think he's useless, to be honest. He sport America when they put that big wall up that would stop the migrants coming in from Mexico. But I think that was the most daftest thing he ever thought up.
Harry, final thoughts?
Oh, fuck. So actually, just on the experiment point, I've just thought, I should have said this earlier, I think one very fun thing we could do to invigorate democracy would be to enfranchise children. So historically, whenever democracies are in a bit of a funk, or they're fucking up, or people are dissatisfied with them, one of the historically viable ways of breathing a bit of life into them is by broadening the franchise. So you let whatever, an ethnic minority group vote, you let Catholics vote, you let rich men vote, you let women, whatever it is. The only way, most constituencies are now covered. The only one that isn't is children. And I think that would be a really good and fun shot in the arm for democracy, to let children vote. And what's the worst that could happen? The weird thing about voting is that it's both very important to have it. If you don't have it, it's a life and death situation. If you're not enfranchised, then you can be overlooked by politics, and that means you're very vulnerable. Literally, your life is in danger. But having the vote doesn't mean that much, really. You don't get to decide what happens. You don't get to make laws. You don't really get to, in a way, not much changes, at least for a little while. So I think kids are overlooked because they can't vote. No politician is interested in what they think or what they want, and that's not fair and not right. And if you enfranchise children, you still have the same shit parties, you still have the same crappy politicians. So not much would really change. So it wouldn't be we wouldn't suddenly get ridiculous politics and policy. So I think we should give kids the vote.
What about children in youth assembly?
And that.
I feel quite interested in looking at my local council. How does it work? Interrogate that a bit more. And then also think about, like, in my local area, what's stopping people standing. so we can get maybe the people who are good leaders but don't want to be leaders, the grumpy leaders. So yeah, I find it quite inspiring to kind of be a bit more critical about my local council and then think about how I could make it better, like from a practical, like in 6 months' time kind of thing. Bit boring, but.
My final thought is related to earlier, I think someone mentioned the Brexit referendum, and I remember at that point in time people talking about how other countries had referendums quite frequently for like a lot of different topics, and because we just like suddenly had one out of the blue, it just became this vote about like lots of other things, and it wasn't really about the EU. And so yeah, I think that would be nice to give people more opportunities to participate in democracy in a more regular way, and also maybe give more space for votes to be about what they're really about, like these individual topics, rather than like protests about other wider things.
Thanks so much. Sheila?
It's been educational. I can't really say a lot else, but very nice to hear from you all. I'll go home.
Oh, thanks, Sheila.
Yes. Today, what Antiparty and Talkaoke has inspired me to think about is the use of AI in the sense of, like what Matt said earlier about thoughts creating reality. Well, once you've created those thoughts, you then, as a human anyway, tend to put language in front of your idea or your concept. So, for example, this beer can is probably called something else in Japanese entirely. And if you hear a Japanese person say that, you wouldn't think of a beer can unless you spoke Japanese. So the terms that we use dictate the reality and the perceptions in which we have. So if, for example, we describe politics, local politics, as a cabinet, or even national politics as a cabinet, what does that synonymously spark in your mind? Is it an organized body of thought and kind of like, documents, legislations that are, pieced together into different sections? Party, when you think about a party, synonymously you think about, having a fat rave and, enjoying yourself. So like Partygate scandal was literally, one of the things that, shocked everyone during Corona. So, AI might also interpret these words in that way if we so program it to do in democracy, because it's synonymous to us in our heads subconsciously. So how would an AI perceive it? Would democracy become a joke?
I very much like what you said, Matt, about manifesting collective wisdom. I think that's what we should be doing. I don't know if that's democracy or maybe that's a new term we're looking for, but it also made me think that maybe rather than getting artificial intelligence to run the system, what about artificial wisdom instead? And how would that be different from artificial intelligence? That's the subject for the next Talkaoke, or maybe it won't be, I don't know, but that's just what I was thinking. But yeah, just going on the thing about young people, work a lot with young people in Newham, where the mayor of Newham is very into young citizens' assemblies. But one thing we found recently, when there was an election, we gave all the young people an opportunity to vote and encourage those over 18 to vote, but none of them were at all interested in party politics. However, they were interested in all the issues. They're interested in climate change, they're interested in equality, they're interested in the cost of living crisis, they're interested in safety, they're interested in having better careers, better opportunities, but that was so detached from party politics. They saw no connection whatsoever. And it wasn't because they didn't know about it, because they knew all about what was going on in the elections through TikTok.
Yeah, why don't have a youth children's assembly?
We're doing you.
Great, and that's what collective intelligence is, right? Collective intelligence, collective wisdom, artificial intelligence, and artificial wisdom. Good points. So it might be the first time that you'll speak, Elliot, but then also the last word of the entire group. No pressure. It can be a word or any more. Let us know.
Well, like Mariana, I wasn't here for most of this conversation, but I think a lot of insightful things were said from a lot of important point of views.
What's your favourite thing that was said?
I don't know, a lot of things were said.
No, come on, give us one thing. Or
no, I.
Favourite. What's sticking out in your mind?
Um,
Well, you can talk about anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be anything.
well, I think what we said about how politicians just seem robotic and just inhuman, and we study law, and I think that's also something that's very present in law. Like, the law just makes no sense to just the average person, and that's a big problem because it just creates a very big divide. And one of the things I think about, especially in my degree, is how do we bridge that gap between politics and the law, and just the people for who politics and the law actually are. Yeah.
Very good point.
Very good point. Maybe that's the topic of the next Talkaoke. Margot, final word, our benevolent leader.
Oh my god. What I wanted to say, I don't know, I just really enjoyed tonight's conversation, and thank you to everybody for coming. But I think a children's Talkaoke assembly will be a lot of fun, I think. So maybe, that'll be quite a cool thing. But interesting point about law as well, because I think you can get very, very specialized in your area of expertise, but then does that automatically mean that you are detaching yourself from just kind of ordinary people, ordinary conversation, ordinary styles of speaking? Does it have to mean that? Do lawyers and other maybe professions, do they need to have like how to be relatable, how to be normal kind of module as well? I don't know.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, thank you everyone for your engagement this evening. Thank you, Effie, for hosting so amazingly for the first half. And I hope everyone's learnt something today. And more importantly, I hope everyone's inspired to engage more democratically.
And well done, Bella, in the middle. And thank you to Antiparty for bringing fantastic people to Talkaoke. And have a great evening, everybody. Well done, Bella.